Hello, everyone. Don't know if you guys can hear me well. Test my sound out. Ain't nobody here yet. I was a little bit late. I got a new mouse, so I had to install it. Hold on. Hello, hello. Hello, hello. Hello, hello. We got one person here. The one person that is here, say hi. Feel free to say hi. I'm gonna put my Discord on right now, so you guys can give me a call whenever you guys want. Talk. We can argue. I don't really care. Friday, so Discord. Hello, everyone. Got a second one on here. Hope you guys are having a good Friday. It's really crazy. Like some of the stuff that's been going on in the news. You got like an airstrike on Syria, but I don't think it's as big of a deal as some people may think it is, because it was really just one bomb that hit this target on the Syrian-Iraqi border, and it was basically just a way of America showing strength. Let me see here. You guys can give me a call on Discord whenever you guys like. I'll put the link on the chat. Give me a call on Discord, and we can talk. I'm thinking about going on Facebook Live, but it's like, man, Facebookers are way different than YouTubers. Like Facebookers, okay, Facebookers are people who like they want to talk about weird gossipy stuff. Like weird gossipy stuff. They want to talk about the end of the world. They want to talk about the apocalypse. They want to talk about whether or not China has parked its navy on the main coastline up in the northeast. They want to talk about Chinese troops invading America. They want to talk about the revival of the Obama administration. They want to talk about how Obama's coming back. They want to talk about how Trump is coming back. They want to talk about, you know, if the vaccine is the what is it, the mark of the beast. And if I don't bring up those things with Facebookers, it's like they don't even want to hear you. YouTubers are, I think, a little bit more intelligent. YouTubers, they want to talk about geopolitics and all that stuff. So that's what I find to be fascinating. I'm not a huge, like, you know, prophecy in the news guy. Remember Hal Lindsey? I remember seeing Hal Lindsey. It was like every Friday or Sunday night or something. I don't remember, but it was like Hal Lindsey would come up there and he would say things like prophecy in the news. And it's like, how long can you commit yourself to a show like that? Because you're just talking about prophecy every week and you're trying to find news stories. Imagine living a huge chunk of your life trying to find news stories that somehow connect with the end of the world. Like that is difficult. That is super difficult because you once in a while you get a really interesting story and you look at it and you're like, that's pretty crazy. That's definitely some kind of lineup, some kind of event that could lead to something worse. Like, I don't know, maybe Russia invades Hungary or something. You could say, oh yeah, that's pretty major. You know, Russia invading Crimea was a pretty big deal. And that has sparked all sorts of tensions, especially between Russia and Turkey, Russia and NATO in general, but Russia and Turkey specifically, because Crimea isn't too far away from Turkey. It's right on the Black Sea. It's right on the Black Sea. Turkey is right across the Black Sea. It's right near Ukraine. They're neighbors practically. And it's you know, Russia taking over Crimea, that only exacerbated the Turkish-Russian tensions that have been there for a long time. Good morning, Kovrig Theodore. Is your name Theodore, by the way? I did not stream last week because I just really didn't feel like it, and plus we had this horrible snowstorm. It was crazy. Okay, so a fellow Theodore, awesome. We had this snowstorm. Hello, Amanda, by the way. We had this snowstorm, and it was like Siberia out here. I'm not even exaggerating. It was like Siberia. There was no water. For a lot of people, there was no power. It was insane. We had no water for over 2 days. Theodores of the world unite, unless, of course, your last name is Bundy, Kaczynski, and Herzl. If those are your last names, then you can screw off. But yeah, once in a while you find a story and you look at it and you're like, yeah, this is major. This is going to have consequences into the future. This is going to have ramifications into the future. Absolutely. For example, Brexit. Brexit, to me, was a huge deal. I was obsessed with Brexit since 2015 or 2016 when it happened. When it happened, I remember, oh my God. I remember when Brexit happened, right? They were talking about the referendum for days. And I remember thinking to myself, my leg is a lot better. Yes, that rooster injury was painful, but I am recovering. Yes, I can walk now. I remember the night of Brexit, and I remember telling people Brexit is going to happen. They're going to vote against the European Union. How did I know that? Premonition, I guess. I don't know. I remember just the sheer hatred against what was happening with the migrant situation, the sheer anger against the European Union, Merkel, a lot of the anger that was expressed towards the EU's immigration policy, the sudden popularity in extreme nationalism. I remember looking at these things and thinking, okay, these people are going to leave the European Union. And it just seemed very obvious to me. So the night of Brexit, bam, I'm watching the news. They said most of the people who voted are going to leave, have voted for Brexit. And I remember staying at my desk till like 6 a.m, writing my thoughts on Brexit. I had a giant cup of super dark, high caffeinated iced tea, and I was ready to go. And I wrote that article because when it comes to articles, like when you got that inspiration, you have to write it. You can't be like, well, I'll write it next week or I'll write it tomorrow. Like you got to start working on it. That's the thing. Sometimes I find myself slacking off, and that's when I mess up because I have these ideas, and then if I slack off, that time in which I was slacking off and being lazy, by the time that's over, I'm like, well, what was I going to write about? Or I had that one idea, and what happened to it? What was I going? Like, what was that idea? And you kind of forget about it. You got to get onto it. Bam, bam, bam. So I started writing, and as I was writing, I was sending messages to people who live in Europe, people that I knew at the time who live in Europe. And there was one guy who lived in England, and I remember asking him, like, what's your opinion? And then I asked some dude in Italy, like, what's your opinion on this? And they gave me their opinions, and I remember quoting them in the article. I said, this is going to exacerbate tensions between the British and the Germans. The British had a lot of debt with the EU. Well, I think the British had debt, or there was a lot of money that was owed to the EU, and the EU had a huge debt problem. It still does. And then the British are just going to leave. They're going to put the brunt of the problem on the shoulders of the Germans. It's going to spark and foment antagonism between the two countries. You're going to start seeing past hatreds come back from the dead. And people laughed at me. This, oh, you're full of crap. You don't know what you're talking about. The EU is garbage, blah, 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 blah. And it's like, well, no, because when you look at history and you see, oh, World War I, British and the Germans were killing each other. World War II, British and the Germans were killing each other. And then there was a split after the Second World War, between the East Germans and the West Germans. God forbid you tell somebody, oh, well, in 1981, Germany. No, it's West Germany. Please get it right. Brexit, yes, you're right. Brexit just made Germany stronger. Yes, you're absolutely right. I completely agree with you. By the way, the guy with the Hebrew letters, you said that you wanted to call me. Give me a call on the Discord if you still want to have that conversation. I just put the link in there. You can give me a call on Discord. Yeah, but you look at history and you're like, okay, they had problems in the past. Like, who let the dog out? There's nothing crazy about what I said. Nothing crazy at all. What happened not too long after Brexit was voted on? The Germans had a meeting in Bratislava, which I think is in Slovakia. Danube Goose. Some guy named Danube Goose just wrote me. Hello, Danube Goose. Danube Goose. That's a nice name. You will wait another time. Okay, that's fine. What happened? They had a meeting in Slovakia, and there was no representative from the UK in the meeting. The first time that has happened in the history of Britain being in the EU. And what did they talk about in this meeting? Making an EU army. Who's going to lead the army? The Frenchies are talking about helping lead this army. And the French do have a very strong position in the EU. There were three major powers in the EU before Brexit. There was the British, there was the Germans, and there was the French. Now, with Brexit, with the British gone, they have now two powers, Germany and France. I have heard that it is possible that they will allow Turkey into the EU to replace the British. But even if that doesn't happen, Turkey is in a way almost like a member of the EU without being an official member of the EU. The biggest trading partner that Turkey has is the European Union. Turkey is a major economic ally of the Germans and of the Europeans in general. And this is one of the reasons as to why the Germans keep Turkey so close as a strategic ally. There's a lot of history between the Germans and the Turks. You also have to factor that in. But I remember when the Germans were saying, oh, let's put sanctions on the Turks because of what they're doing in Syria. But then they found out that they're still selling weapons to the Turks. The Greeks were begging the Germans to stop selling weapons, and the Germans said, 99999. Oh, you're Danube. Okay, cool. If you want to talk, man, just give me a call. Or let me see. Hold on. Danube. Okay. I'm going to add you to the Discord here. Hello. I just added you as a friend and I wrote you. If you want me to call you, just let me know. You don't have a microphone? Are you using a phone? Are you using an iPhone? If you're using an iPhone, you can just use the internal microphone that the phone was designed with. The Brits had the biggest empire in history, and yet they can't handle their debts. Well, the British military is greatly diminished. I mean, they've been talking about like rebuilding it and everything, but yeah, the British military needs to be restructured and re-amplified. Turkey is like Mexico, kind of part of North America, but kind of part of South America. Yeah, I can understand that observation. Now Turkey bringing refugees to northern Cyprus, and they go to Cyprus, 13,000. Any sanctions? Of course, no Germans. I've sent you emails regarding crypto Christians in Turkey. Oh, okay. Oh, you're from a PC? Your PC doesn't have an internal microphone? Should have got a Mac. Should have got a Mac. That's what I did, my friend. I got a Mac. But yeah, we're going back to history. I've been talking about this for a long time. Oh, by the way, I just finished this book. Let me get this book out real quick. Hold on. I almost forgot. Hello, Inquisitor. You want to talk about the Inquisition? I'd be happy to. This is called The Gods Revolution. I've quoted and mentioned this book several times in my videos. This was an excellent read, and I thought I would give you guys a little review of it. The Gods of Revolution by Christopher Dawson. The thing about this book is that it's actually unfinished. Christopher Dawson did not finish this book because World War II happened. And so from writing on the French Revolution, he began to write on how the world escalated into having a second world war. So he got occupied with that and he never finished this book. So this book was published without the author really finishing it. But nonetheless, it is a very informative and educational book. It talks about how the struggle between the wealthy and the poor of the French Revolution is actually kind of an illusion that some people have. It's based on propaganda because it was really the speculators and the very wealthy class that would dominate France thanks to the French Revolution. I will say the style of Dawson is not my favorite. Hello, Ivan Peter from Croatia. Awesome. I've only spoken to one Croatian person in my life. He was a Croatian priest. So I'd be interested to talk to you if you want to call me on Discord. Here, I put the link on the chat. But anyway, yeah, I read this book and it was actually quite good. But I'm not too crazy about his writing style. I understand why he utilizes it. So his writing style is basically to shorten things out and generalize events, to speak about or to detail historical events in very general terms. And the reason why I think Dawson utilizes this style is because he wants to put in as much information as he possibly can in a short amount of space, in a short book. So instead of making a 600, 700, 800 page volume book on the French Revolution, which you most definitely could do if you actually put in like a huge amount of the details. Hello, Sotitis from Greece. Anyway, yeah. You could do that, right? If you put in a huge amount of detail on the French Revolution and its origins. But the problem with that is you have a super long book and most people aren't going to read 600, 700, 800 pages on the French Revolution. This book, on the other hand, is 147 pages. It's 147 pages. And I got it upside down. And so he's trying to put in as much information as he possibly can in a short book. So he leaves out a lot of detail. And I ended up Googling a bunch of stuff that he was writing on to get more information, which isn't bad. Like, I like doing extra research and finding out new information. I'm not too crazy about one book syndrome. Sometimes people will write one book. Sometimes people will only write one book, or they'll read one book and they think they know everything about that particular subject. But it's always important to when you're reading a book, to Google the things that the author is writing on, to search the things that their author is writing on and corroborate it or expand upon what he is saying. That way you learn more information and more specifics on the subject that you're reading on. So that's not really a huge deal. I do that anyway, even with this, I remember reading Augustin Bauduel's book on the French Revolution and its occult background. And that book was like 849 pages. And even as I was reading it, I found myself Googling a lot of the names that Augustin Bauduel was detailing. So I'm going to do that no matter what. So it's not really a huge deal, but nonetheless, I did learn a lot on the French Revolution reading this book. I learned about the different factions, how the French Revolution wasn't a monolith. It just wasn't like a one group of people who all had the same goal. There were different factions, different political factions in the French Revolution. So you had everyone knows about the Jacobins, but then you had other groups as well that were, they could have been maybe more fanatical, or they could have been more moderate. And there ended up being a war between the different factions, and they would end up killing each other because the Jacobins were getting a little bit too crazy and they were getting a little bit too power hungry. They wanted to control the economy completely. They wanted complete government control over the economy. That was to the ire of a lot of people for obvious reasons. And then also you had the royalists, and the royalists were people who wanted to bring back the king. And there was a civil war in France between the Republicans and the monarchists or the royalists. The royalists lost. And then eventually there would be established a new institution of government called the Directory. The Directory consisted of directors. I've talked about this before. And these directors were basically the financial speculators of France. And then, of course, we all know about the rise of Napoleon Bonaparte. And with Bonaparte, France becomes a huge world empire. They end up invading Germany, Prussia, and all of the areas that France controlled would eventually revolt. Like the people who lived under French occupation for long enough, they had enough of it, and then they did a revolution. One of the observations that Dawson makes that I find to be very fascinating is how the French believed that they were spreading enlightenment by conquering other countries. So they believed, they had this ideology. Now, every empire has an ideology, right? You can go look at any empire that's ever existed, and it has had an ideology. The Mongolians had an ideology. They thought, well, the great Khan is expanding the wonderful Mongol horde, the power of the Mongol horde, and he is led by the great goddess Tengri of the deep blue sky, blah, blah, blah. Go back to the Assyrians. They talked about how, Marduk or Ashur was leading the emperor to power. The Persians believed that Ahura Mazda was giving power to the emperor, and he was expanding the abode of truth, of the truth. That's what Ahura Mazda means, the truth, against Ahriman, which is the lie, and the world that wasn't under Persian control was under the banner of Ahriman. They were under the banner of the lie. Kind of like Jesse Lee Peterson, the children of the lie, man. But anyway, yes. So every empire has an ideology, and the French had an ideology, and they believed they were spreading enlightenment. And they controlled all these territories, and the people that would revolt against the French, they would actually use the very ideology that the French claimed to be fighting for or to be advancing against the French. So the French believed that by conquering other countries, they were advancing the Enlightenment. The people who revolted against French occupation were inspired by that very Enlightenment, because part of the Enlightenment was the idea of nationalist self-determination. Every nation has a right to self-determination. Every country has the right to fight for its independence. We don't need no world empire. Now, one thing that I find interesting about how France became an empire is how it began with French nationalism. Part of the French Revolution was, this is a huge part of the French Revolution, was nationalism. Augustin Baruel talks about how there was a faction of the French Revolution that called itself the Patriots. There was a guy by the name of Bertrand Barrère who talked about how the nation needs to become the new religion of France, wherein every French child, when they are born, will be consecrated, as opposed to the church, to the nation. Every child will be consecrated to the nation. So instead of children being baptized to the church, they would be baptized to France. So there was a strong element of nationalism in the French Revolution. And the French would eventually pursue empire. So they were still nationalistic, but they would pursue empire. Now, what I find really crazy is how a lot of really obnoxious people will quote some guy from Prager University who talks about the glories of nationalism. There's a guy, I forgot his name, Horam something. I forgot his name. I'll look it up real quick, though. But there's a guy on Prager University loves to talk about nationalism and why nationalism is awesome. What's his name? The importance of nationalism. Prager University. What's his name? Yorham Hazony. Now, Yorham Hazony, he's part of the Theodor Herzl Society or Institute or whatever the hell it is. There's another Theodore that needs to be scratched off the committee of Theodores because they give us a bad name. He gives us a bad name. But Theodore Yorami or whatever the hell his name is, he's part of the Theodore Yoram Hazony. Yoram Hazony. This guy's part of the Theodor Herzl Institute, and he's a part of the PragerU universe, the PragerU network. And he did some video, I remember not too long ago, a couple of years ago, on why nationalism is awesome and why we should all embrace nationalism. And he says he of course has to respond to the argument that the Nazis were nationalists, and they were nationalists. Hitler himself considered himself a nationalist. And Yorham Hazony says, well, the Nazis actually weren't nationalists. I keep reading the comments and it's distracting me, but it's my fault. I shouldn't get myself so easily distracted. He says the Nazis weren't nationalist. The Nazis were actually internationalists. Why? Because they conquered other countries. So if you conquer other countries, you're not a nationalist. So Americans can't be nationalistic. I don't know why people believe this bullshit. Like, Americans are nationalistic and they don't mind America controlling other countries. So the French were nationalists, but they ended up conquering other countries. Who is to say that nationalists can't become imperialists? Like, where's the rule that says nationalists can't become imperialists? They absolutely can. We've seen this throughout history. Who is to say that, like, for example, if a country becomes super nationalistic, right? And let's say that this country becomes so nationalistic that they say, well, this neighboring country, some time ago and a century ago, they kind of took some chunk of our border. Well, we want it back. So they invade it. I mean, Poland, like, a huge chunk of Germany got absorbed by Poland. And the Germans believed that Poland belonged to them. And just kill all the Poles because they're occupying German territory. Why is Yorham Hazony all of a sudden the arbitrator? All of a sudden is the determiner for what nationalism is? I forget where I read this, but a Russian statesman was criticizing America's democracy by saying, if you separate the church from the state will run the church. So separation of church and state, let's talk about that for a moment. So the idea of separating church and state, of course, this is a product of the Enlightenment. The thing about church and state, some societies will be very good having a state religion. That are religiously agree on the same religion, generally speaking. Oh, goodness. My internet has gone straight down. Oh, internet's back. I have really crappy internet. So if a society is, if a population of a society, of a country, has a general agreement on the religion of the land, then you can have a church, you can have a state church. You can have one because there's harmony in the society, religion-wise. But in a society where there are literally tens of thousands of different religions and different religious sects, it would be counterproductive, to say the least, to have a state religion because people would rebel. America was founded by Puritans. And the Puritans were people who objected to a state religion. They objected to Anglicanism. The Anglicans wanted all of the Protestants in England to conform to some book of prayer. I don't remember, common book of prayer or something. The Puritans said, we hate this damn book, and they wanted to burn the book to the ground, and they said that the Anglican Church was the harlot of Babylon. Before it was the Catholic Church. All of a sudden it's the Anglican Church. Puritans are people, they were people who can never be satisfied. So the Puritans come here, and what do? There is a common myth that they teach people here in the United States, that the Puritans were simply a people who wanted to worship God and freedom. They wanted to worship God and freedom, and they didn't want to bother anyone else around them. They came here for religious freedom. That's the reason why. They just wanted to worship the Lord. The reality is that they wanted the freedom to control other people. The Puritans did not come to the New World to enjoy religious freedom. They came to the New World to have the freedom to control and tyrannize other people. The Anglicans, and the Catholics for that matter, despise the Puritans, and they were right to do so. I remember, because for so many years I was told about the lie of the Puritans. Like, oh, they were wonderful people. I really try, Ortho Christos, thank you. They were wonderful people. They were wonderful. They just wanted to worship God. They wanted to go up to the wilderness and worship the Lord in the wilderness because the Anglicans were the harlot of Babylon who just wanted to murder Christians for no reason at all. Just decided to wake up in the morning and I want to kill Puritans. Pass the butter. Feel like just killing Puritans in the morning, sir. So England was filled with a bunch of Ebenezer Scrooges. They were all evil. They were just killing Christians, killing Puritans, whatever. Puritans came for religious freedom. That's the reason why. America was founded on the idea of religious freedom. So then one day I read a book. It was called The Beauty of Christianity by René de Chateaubriand. I've talked about this book numerous times, and I can't tell people enough as to why they should read this book. It's an excellent book. The Beauty of Christianity by René de Chateaubriand. I don't think a lot of people even read this stuff anymore. So this book was written by a Catholic. René de Chateaubriand was a Catholic, and he bashed the Puritans in the beginning of the book. In the beginning of the book, he talks about the Puritans and how they were a terrible heretical sect. And that was the very first time I really read, was it the first time? Could have been the second time. I had read that the Puritans were destructive and insidious. And I did not understand it. Then I read this book. I read an essay, actually. It was written by some guy. I forgot his name. This is a long time ago. This was like over, I'm going to say around a decade ago. And I read this book, and it talked about the Puritans. And it said that a common misconception about the Puritans is that they came to America for religious freedom, for the purpose of religious freedom. The reality is that they came to America not only to do the religion that they wanted, but to dictate the religious freedom of their neighbors. I think there was a saying back in the day, Puritans would pray for their neighbors on Sunday, and they would pray on their neighbors for the rest of the week. That could have been the Quakers. I don't remember. Correct me if I'm wrong. And you had the Dutch immigrants who came to the New World, and you had some other, I think the Irish immigrants who also came to the New World. The Puritans were persecuting all those people. You couldn't even celebrate Christmas in a Puritan area. You couldn't. They banned Christmas. Now, what's crazy is that American Christians love to talk about the Puritans and how great they were. But then they'll talk about how the liberals want to do a war on Christmas. It's like, why are you praising the people who actually succeeded in this so-called war on Christmas? The irony of it. Like, well, the ACLU is doing a war on Christmas. It's like, well, you better stop praising the Puritans because they wanted to ban Christmas forever. And I think the Puritans eventually said something like, well, listen, mate, you can celebrate Christmas, but you can't do anything outside. No singing Christmas carols, no Christmas trees outside, no Christmas lights, none of that. No, none of that stuff. You do it all inside of the confines of your own home. We don't want to see that, okay? We don't want to see that degenerate Christmas shite, okay, mate? So, yeah, the Puritans didn't really want freedom. Where was I going with this? I don't remember. Yes, so eventually the Puritans, they kind of like died out. A lot of them became, believe it or not, a lot of Puritans would eventually just become transcendentalists. Basically, the transcendental movement was America's first New Age movement. The idea that all religions were the same, they all worship, we all should just worship the universal God and get in touch with nature and connect ourselves spiritually with nature. That's why, who was it? Thoreau, I think his name was. He went to the forest and talked to carrots or something like that. I don't remember. So the Puritans eventually just disintegrated into different sects. Some of them became Unitarian, and I think the reason why the Puritans went into Unitarianism is because they were trying to look at God almost like a scientific object. They looked at God almost like something that they could observe scientifically. So they were trying to compartmentalize the aspects of God way too much, and they made Christianity too technical. This is one of my problems with Calvinists, is that they're way too technical. Calvinists are they tend to be a very manipulative bunch of people. I'm not a huge fan of Calvinists. I'm sure there's some great people out there who are Calvinists, but a lot of these neo-Calvinists are just kind of like skinheads with a Christian form. Some of them even look like skinheads or neo-Nazis, and they'll come up to you and they'll be like, "Do you believe in the sovereignty of God?" Yeah. So then you must believe that God chose a bunch of people to randomly burn in hell just because he felt like it. I can't accept that. So a lot of people just got sick of Calvinism and they just went into transcendentalism. They became some New Age people, and some of them became Unitarians. They just said, you know what? This Trinity stuff, way too complicated. Let's just reject the whole thing. The Council of Nicaea, forget it, throw it out the window. We are now basically Muslims. But America, it has tens of thousands of different religious sects. There's so many churches in America that don't even have a standard theology. There's like you basically have church franchises in America. You got your Calvary chapels or your Foursquare churches. And then you have, of course, the mainstream churches like the Anglican Church. You have the Methodist Church, the Episcopalian, the Presbyterian churches. These are the mainstream Protestant churches. But then you also have the Catholic Church, the Orthodox churches in America, but that's fairly new. But it's growing in popularity because the Catholic Church has, to a great extent, I hate to say it, but to a great extent has become a gay club. And then, of course, a lot of people are getting sick and tired of the craziness of Protestantism with oh Lord, and you got to just pray to God. God is going to help your finances, and your marriage is going to get fixed by the Lord. Your marriage and no one's marriage is getting fixed, and no one's making money. They're all broke, and they realize like maybe religion has nothing to do with any of this bullshit. So they go to Orthodoxy because at least with Orthodoxy, there's still a very strong sense of Christian mysticism and spirituality. And that's one thing that I can respect about the Orthodox. I'm not against the Orthodox. I'm not against the Orthodox Church. I hate to sound like I hate to sound like that because I feel like I'm obligated to say that because people automatically think that, oh, if you're Catholic, like automatically you're anti-Orthodox. It's like, I'm not. I think Orthodox people, I think they were able to preserve Christianity better than the Catholics. But yes. So hold on a second. There's so many different sects. And I remember, a decade or so ago going to these churches in America with my dad, and we would go to these churches in like the backwater areas of Maryland. And you would just see the church there, and there's like 300 people, and there's not really much of a standard of theology. There's this one particular church would not be a part of a network. There isn't any sort of commission that could keep the pastor in check. There's the elders, but God knows what kind of politics is being done in that one singular church. And so you have all these different splinter groups in America, and there's countless of them. There's countless of these churches, going around. And then you have like these messianic lunatics who think they're Jews, but they're really like Puerto Rican. Oh, and by the way, I gotta get this out there, because there's this one thing that just pisses me off to no end. I gotta tell you guys this. There has been a very strange phenomena. Hopefully one day it's gonna die. But there has been this very strange phenomena that has lasted for decades of South American people, or like Spanish speaking people, who think they're Jews. I swear this is a disease that needs to be eradicated. I remember years ago meeting this Puerto Rican lady, and I said, and she had like a hair covering, but she was in a Catholic church. And I said, I didn't know who this woman was. And I said, oh, welcome, how are you? What's your name? And she had a very thick accent. I said, where are you from? And she said, I'm from Puerto Rico. And I said, oh, and she said, yeah, I'm here for a wedding, because there were people that were going to get married at this church. And I said, oh, okay, are you Catholic? And she said, no, I'm Jewish. Puerto Rican Jew? Okay, I don't know. Maybe there are Puerto Rican Jews out there. I'm not entirely sure. So I said, so, oh, were you born Jewish? Are you like a part of an Israeli family or something? And you got some Puerto Rican friends? I don't know. And she's like, no, you know how the Puerto Ricans talk? They have that accent. You can tell a Puerto Rican though by the accent. Like, they're not Mexican. Those people are different. She's like, no, I found out my roots. It's in my roots, in my blood. It's in my blood. I said, oh, you're in your blood. Oh, I see. So basically, your last name's Garcia. You Googled Garcia on the internet, and you found out that, 800 years ago, there was some family in Spain with the Garcia name, and they were conversos. They were Jews who became Catholic, and you found this out. And now all of a sudden you're a Jew, and you're singing the Havla Liga Hava, and you got the Israeli flag in your hand, and you got a menorah, and you got a Star of David on your house, and you got a whatever, and you're playing dreidel every Friday night or something like that. Oh, and you're following Shabbat, and you're doing the whole thing. So I said, so what convinced you to become Jewish? She said, oh, I found out my roots. It's like my roots, like my last name, I said, oh, okay. So you became Jewish, not for any seriously theological reasons, but because of genetics? Is that what it is? Like, you think you got Jewish stuff in your blood? Is that what it is? No. Well, I mean, I read into it, but I read about the connections. So I said, so really what convinced you to become a Jew is you did some Googling on the internet, and then all of a sudden you started reading the Talmud. She's like, oh, no, well, I got to go. Okay, bye-bye, shalom. But there's so much of this bullshit that goes on, especially in Protestant churches. You see this, and it's not just in South America. I saw this bullshit when I was in Spain. I went to Spain, and I met this Spanish guy. This dude was as white as salt. White, he looked 100% European, but he was crazy, though. He was actually on psych meds. And I'm like, they're taking psych meds up here in Spain, too? Everybody's crazy. But he was like, yeah, I'm a Jew. I'm a Jew. Yo soy un judeo. I think I'm a Jew. Oh, how do you know? And this guy's last name was Valero, by the way. So the next time you see the Valero gas station, think of this guy. And he's like, oh, I'm a Jew, I think. And I said, oh, how do you know that? Oh, I Googled my last name, Valero. Turns out there was some family in Spain that had this last name. It's like, and you have some people from Peru who are as dark as chocolate out of a cocoa tree, and they're like, I am a Jew. And I'm like, you look like an actor from Apocalypto or from Dances with Wolves. What the hell are you talking about? I am a Jew. How do you know you're a Jew? I knew this one guy, his last name was Salvador. And he was from El Salvador, believe it or not. His wife was from Peru. And they became Jews. All of a sudden, I'm not even joking. They were born Catholic, then they got into Protestantism. Then all of a sudden they started thinking they were Jews. They converted to Judaism, or they think they converted to Judaism, because the Jews, the real Jews, would never even accept these people. They'd laugh them off the synagogue. They'd laugh them out of the synagogue. They really would. They wouldn't want anything to do with these people because they're an embarrassment. I wouldn't want anything to do with these people. I don't want anything to do with these people. I'm not even Jewish. But all of a sudden, like, he was Catholic, and then all of a sudden he became Protestant, and he was a very cocky guy too. I think he ran a tile installing company or something. He's like, I do the best work. You know how Latin American dudes are. I do the best work. I do fine work. The tile, perfect tile. The whole thing is perfect. All of a sudden, this dude's walking around with a yarmulke on the back of his head. He's got the tallits, the white robes. He's walking out of there like he's a member of the Sanhedrin. And I'm sitting here like, one ticket to Israel, please? Like, what the hell? You want to get shot in Brooklyn or something? Like, what are you doing? Oh, I made a 360-degree turn. You mean a 180 degree? No, I made a... What is this? No, I made a 360-degree turn. I moved my life around so much. You got no idea. You got no idea, man. You got no idea, man. The Trinity, that's all fake by the Catholic. The Catholic Church made it up, man. It made it up. That's all nonsense, man. That's trash, man. No. All that Catholic stuff, it's just idolatry, man. They're worshiping idols. Like when they're praying to Mary, they're worshiping that goddess Ishtar. But like, I made a 180-degree turn. And this dude is walking around like a kid who wants to be Gandalf in The Lord of the Rings, and he's dressed up like a wizard. He's dressed up like a wizard, this dude. And he's like, I'm a rabbi. I'm a rabbi. So Mr. Rabbi Salvador and his Peruvian wife, who looks 100% indigenous, all of a sudden they're Jews. So I'm like, okay, so you think that the Catholic Church is all filled with idolatry. All right, Mr. Rabbi. Then why the hell did the Spanish, when they invaded Peru, destroy the Incan religion? And they started saying, but they killed the people here. They killed the indigenous people here. No, they didn't kill the indigenous people here because your wife is still alive. But they wanted to kill the people. I said the Incans did human sacrifice. What are you talking about? Cannibalism, human sacrifice, all these horrific things. Why did the Catholic Church get rid of this? If you are, if all of a sudden they're like for idolatry and paganism, they couldn't answer the question. Well, the Trinity is false. It's idolatry. It's paganism. Really? Have you ever heard of Clement of Rome? Have you ever heard of Clement of Rome? He was a man who was a disciple of St. John himself, said that Jesus Christ is God. You guys don't know what you're talking about. But that's the problem. When you have people who are illiterate when it comes to the church fathers and basic church history, they will fall into anything. And that's the thing. Like when you cut off the source, when you cut yourself off from the main source, which is the church, the Catholic Church, or the Orthodox Church, and you don't have that ecclesiastical institution that's connected to ancient history, you're going to fall for all sorts of bullshit. It's like what Tertullian says. Tertullian said that the true church is like a beautiful olive tree. The olive is smooth and shiny. It's edible. And the heretical churches, they're a wild olive tree where the olives are fuzzy and inedible. But yes, that was my conversation with the wizard. But there's so much of this BS that goes on. I remember years ago, I met this lady. I think she was from Texas or California or something. She was this Mexican-American woman, and she was like, Yeah, I'm a Jew. I think I had like relatives who were killed in the Inquisition. It's like everybody wants to be a Jew. Everybody's like, why don't you be content with who you are? If you're born Jewish, okay, you're born Jewish. But if you ain't a Jew, if you're Mexican, Puerto Rican, French, Spanish, whatever, just be content with who you are. Like, who cares? It's insanity to me. It's complete insanity. So let's see what you guys have to say. I'll try to respond to everything. Off topic a bit, but some time ago you mentioned some Japanese dictator of Peru and that sounded interesting. Would you elaborate more on it? Okay, yeah. So Peru was under the cheese guy. What was his name? Alberto Fujimori. This guy was a huge American ally, and he was also a eugenist, and tons of people in Peru were actually sterilized under his administration. So there's a lot to unpack with that alone, but I'll just give you that because that's what I know myself. But if you Google this stuff, there's a tremendous amount of detail on this story. But yeah, look up Alberto Fujimori eugenics, or you could just look up Peru sterilization and you'll see it. And believe it or not, Japan itself had a sterilization program that did not end until the 1990s. I was alive when it ended. Hello, Rob. Brexit just made Germany stronger. Yes, I agree. The Brits had the biggest empire in history. Okay, I already read that. Let's see here. Turkey. Okay, I already read this. Turkey bringing refugees to northern Syria. Okay, I already read this. Kovric Theodore, are you a gamer? If you are you like a Twitch streamer or something? Or what games do you play? Turkey is a transcontinental nation. Yes, I would agree. It's like half of it is in Europe and half of it is in the Middle East. God bless you all. Greetings from Croatia. Hello, Ivan. The Turks are Asians. Yes and no. They're like Asiatic people, kind of, but they're like super mixed with Indo-European and Greek. There is just some influence from Europe. Doesn't mean the rich are always in the right. Look into the meaning of the term precariat. This is our life post NAFTA. Okay. I'll look that up. Kovric Theodore. In 1942, the Turkish government issued a tax on its population based on net worth. The rates, Turkish Muslim, 5%, Armenians, Christians, 232% Greek Christians. Interesting. Originally belonged to the Greeks, Anatolians, Assyrians, and Kurds before the Turkic peoples influenced by Islam arrived. Yes, that is correct. Self-determination is fine within reason. Yes, absolutely, I agree. You got to have a balance, you know? Everything needs a balance. I forget where I read this, but a Russian statesman, okay, I already read this. Nationalism and egalitarianism are two sides of the same materialistic coin. Yes, I would agree with that. Both aim for utopia in a fallen world. Yes, I agree. All socialist societies have a vested religious interest. It's best to be honest about it. Yeah, I would agree with you on that one, Pano. But what I would say is that because there's so much religious disagreement in America, it would be difficult to have like an American church with a standard Christian theology because people would rebel. But I think you're correct when you say that there is a religious interest that the U.S. government has. Hence why you'll see people who were, part of the U.S. government going to churches and doing speaking engagements. Hence why there is a huge interest in making sure that people are very pro-Israel. And that's why there's a lot of inundation of Zionist theology in American churches. So yes, churches in America are a huge vessel for patriotism. So we have to keep that in mind. So yeah, churches are absolutely a part of American interest. They maintain patriotism. They maintain a certain support for certain policies. Absolutely. Separating church from state is really Japheth leaving the tent of Shem. Yes, I would say in the European context, but in America, America was a country founded on the idea of separating the church from the state. You're correct in that, yes, it's Japheth leaving the tent, but at the same time, Practically speaking, it just wouldn't be a good idea to try to have a church religion in America. We do actually have a church religion. We don't call it a religion. It's basically, I pledge allegiance to the flag. I mean, there is definitely a religious aspect to that. Nationalism is only bad when it becomes statist. Zionism is statism. Most Americans don't want to be involved in other nations. You're confusing nationalism with chauvinism. Nationalism is only bad when it becomes statist. Well, I would say that nationalism is truly a threat when it takes over the state. Like when it becomes popular, it's a potential threat, but it becomes it's still a threat when it becomes popular. But it becomes very effectively dangerous when it takes over the state. And when it takes over the state, then you have, it entails militarism, and that could involve, conquering other countries. Here's my thing about the church-state relationship. A church, religion, faith is an integral part of a society state. It is a part of society. Therefore, it's difficult to keep apart. Yes, I agree. But you're living in Greece, where the Orthodox Church still has a lot of influence. In America, we have the Starbucks Church. Basically, you go have your coffee, and then you have a religious experience with coffee. And then you read the book of 2nd Thessalonians. And you call it Christianity. Protestant missionaries fostered ecumenism. Yeah, I'm sure there's some truth to that. You are killing the Brit accent. Thank you very much. I really do try. Puritans didn't make up the entire U.S., the South. Well, for one thing, when the Puritans were here, it wasn't really the U.S. It was the Massachusetts colony. Yes, there were people in the South who came here from France and from Spain. And yes, they had, of course, a different culture. They were Catholic. But I'm talking about the Massachusetts colony. When America was founded, Louisiana and states like Alabama, they weren't really there. That came later on. I'm talking about the conventional historical narrative of the United States. The Puritans at least gave America a pretty strong Christian identity, unlike the Brits with their Anglicanism. Yeah, but the Puritans weren't able to sustain it, and they weren't able to maintain it and perpetuate it because the Puritans were crazy and people got sick of them. Anglicanism is preposterous, but at least they gave us the King James Version. It's a beautiful translation despite its occasional flaws. Yes, I agree. It's a beautiful translation. Ted, it's Friday. It just went away. Just vent away. I completely agree. Good night, Sotiris. I hope you sleep well. Exactly. Heather Green, the Pilgrims and the Puritans were not the same thing. Many unknowledgeable Americans think Puritans and the Pilgrims were one and the same, but they weren't. Okay. Thank you for the correction. I never said Pilgrims, by the way. I said Puritans. But Puritans were fanatics. What is the difference between a Pilgrim and a Puritan? Is there a difference? Let me know. Unitarianism sounds proto-atheistic, materialistic. Yes, I agree. It's basically putting God through a scientific lens and saying that the Trinity is not really rational because it doesn't sound logical or realistic. So therefore, we should have a deistic God where it's just one entity, not three in one. And thus, that makes more sense. So yes, you're correct. It's looking at God with an atheistic lens. That is the fruit of scholasticism. That may be true. I've actually never really looked into this. I've heard this before, but I've never seriously looked into this. I would be glad to learn more, though. Panacostudos, LOL. Aquinas set that trend. Calvin took it to a whole new level. Again, I have to look more into this. I'm not rejecting it. I have to look more into it. Can you tell the connection between the name Fatima and the Shia and the Catholic religion? I believe Fatima was one of the wives or the sister of Muhammad. I gotta brush up on my Islam. I don't know. I don't know. I haven't studied Islam really in years. I think it's kind of a horse that's been beaten to death already. Muhammad. Yeah, he was the wife of Muhammad. He was a cousin of the Prophet. Or no, he was the wife of the cousin of the Prophet. She was the, what the hell's wrong with me? She was the wife of Ali ibn Abi Talib, who was a cousin of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. Sorry, I gotta say it in Arabic. Salam salam. Salam. Oh, by the way, I'll be my dad and I will be on the Sam Shamoon show on Monday at I think 2 p.m. We'll be on the Sam Shamoon YouTube channel on Monday, and I am excited about that. I'm actually very happy for Sam Shamoon. I don't know if you guys know this, but Sam Shamoon is pretty much Orthodox Christian. He is adhering to the church fathers and to the apostolic succession. I'm very happy for him. Sam Shamoon used to be a Calvinist. He was a part of that whole network with James White. And then he realized very recently, actually, that, well, all that Calvinist stuff really isn't true. He got into a debate with Matt Slick, and that last name suits him. He is now adhering to the church fathers and reading the church fathers. He was actually trying to write me last year, a couple of years ago, and he was like, "Hey, I really want to talk to your dad." And at that point, I didn't really trust him all that well because Shamoon and I had some bad blood in the past. He was basically saying that I was a heretic, and then I wrote him, and we started arguing, and I said some pretty nasty things to him. But I also said, "Hey, if you want to have a debate, we can debate it." And then he didn't debate me, and then he ended up sending Keith Thompson to debate me, and I ended up debating Thompson. You can still see it on YouTube. So we were kind of like internet enemies. But then he wanted to talk to my dad, and I didn't know why. I didn't really trust him. And then I saw the videos on YouTube a couple of days ago, and I was like, "Oh, that's the reason why he wants to talk." So I wrote him, and he gave me his number. My dad and him talked on the phone for a while. And so we're going to be on that show. I'm actually very, very happy for that guy. I'm glad that we have been able to reconcile our past tensions and have a civil dialogue on Christian religion. Somebody just wrote me on Discord. Well, hold on. I think Sam Shamoon's family originally came from Iraq, but he was born in Kuwait. But he is definitely Middle Eastern. He is part of the Semitic race. Let's see here. I see you're drinking God's Gift. Yeah, I'm drinking this beer here. It's called Hans. It's a German Pilfer. Got a little German. People say, "Oh, Ted, you hate the Germans or something." I'm like, I drink German beer. It tastes good. What are you guys talking about? I used to drink wine. I still do, but man, after drinking beer, I'm like, damn, beer is so much better than wine. John Calvin took what Augustine said about personal sexual ethics and overcorrected by saying pleasure equals evil. Yeah, that makes sense. I think Calvin was basically almost like a Cathar, essentially uniting the evil God and the good God of Albigensianism and making it into one deity, and made God the creator of evil. Orthodoxy in America has a lot of work to do. Lots of the converts are still carrying around their Protestant baggage. Yes, I completely agree. Yes, a lot of Americans, they leave Protestantism to become Orthodox, and then they still have a lot of that weird anti-Catholicism. Oh, Ted is pissed a little bit. Massive inferiority complex. I think you're talking about the people who think they're Jews. I agree. My name is Neta Rodriguez. My name is Neta Rodriguez. I read this thing somewhere that like there was one guy named Rodriguez, and he was a Jew in Spain. He was killed by the Inquisition. But yeah, I think the last name Ross, the Jewish last name Ross, I think it's part of Rodriguez. So Rodriguez is actually Ross Rodriguez. So my real last name is Ross. So I'm actually a Jew. Pretty soon gonna have a bar mitzvah for me, even though I'm 50 years old. Few know, but tacos are actually the lost tribe of Israel. You guys crack me up. Tacos are actually really what the Hebrews ate when the manna from heaven came down. That was actually tacos, guys. Then when the Jews got sick and tired of manna and they wanted meat, that's when you had the first meat taco. The original taco was vegetarian, guys. They were eating lettuce on it. That was it. Then they got tired of it. They want meat, and God gave them meat. So they had the first taco al pastor from heaven. And don't forget, guys, we all know that when Moses hit that rock twice, that was actually a piñata that he was hitting. It wasn't really a rock, guys. I mean, come on. I'm going to talk like a black philosopher. When Moses hit that rock, when he hit that rock twice, that was a piñata. It makes perfect sense, y'all, because think about it. If water was supposed to come out of a rock, then it would have come out after one strike. But no, had to be two strikes because it was a piñata. And sometimes piñatas take a little bit of work. They take a little bit of work. Wasn't really candy up in that piñata, y'all, but it was actually water. Water came out of the piñata. And then the Jews said it was bitter. Remember they said it was bitter? But then God said, take some wood and put it in the water, and the water became sweet. That was candy. So that was the very first candy piñata. My Rus. Do not forget the Black Hebrews. Of course. How can I forget the Black Hebrews? I remember years, like a decade ago, seeing videos of people on YouTube, like Black Hebrew Israelites in New York City somewhere preaching. And the way that they preach, they have like one guy holding the Bible. Hold on. I got to get a more realistic look. This looks like it could be a Bible. Like there's one guy holding the Bible and there's one guy speaking and he's grabbing the mic. He has a mic in his hand. And he's like, white people. Hold on. I'll be a little too loud here. White people will bow down in the face of the black man. Mm-hmm. And white women will kiss the toes of every black man in the world. They will not be able to enjoy freedom unless they kissed every toe of every African in the world as reparations for what? The Edomites, all the so-called white man, did to the so-called black man who are the original Hebrews. LeBron, yes, sir. Pull out the Bible, yes, sir. Now, I want you to quote Jeremiah 35, verse 4. Jeremiah 35, verse 4. Read it. What does it say? And the word of the Lord said to the prophet. And the word of the Lord said to the prophet that the Hebrew shall rise. And the Hebrew shall rise. And his skin will be like bronze. His skin will be like bronze. Who got skin like bronze? Now, pull up the book. Pull up the book of Revelation. Put up Revelation verse 12. Oh, no, wait, hold up. Revelation verse 14. Okay. Revelation verse 14. Chapter 14. Hear the word of the Lord. Hear the word of the Lord. And I saw the Son of Man. And his skin was like bronze. And his skin was like bronze. And his hair was like sheep's wool. Who got hair like bronze? Who got skin like bronze? Ain't no white people. Ain't no so-called white person out here who got skin like bronze. Ain't no so-called Jew in Israel got skin like bronze. And who has hair like wool? Who got hair like wool? Who got hair like wool? Who has hair like wool? I remember seeing this group like over a decade ago, and it's like who the hell would ever listen to these maniacs? And now they got a huge internet following, and it's pretty scary. It was actually a shooting in Brooklyn. I remember that happened a couple of years ago. You losing your mind? No, dude, I am not losing my mind. I am high off life right now. Yes, he is part of the Assyrian Church of the East, but I'm pretty sure that the Catholic Church and the Assyrian Church of the East had some sort of reconciliation. Well, we all know that Jesus used pesos. We all know that his real name wasn't Jesus, okay? His real name was Jesus. He was Mexican. We all know the true Jews are Mexican, okay? Get over it. I know a lot of Israeli people are just butthurt about this. They need to get over it, okay, guys? It really wasn't Moses. It wasn't Moshe. It really was Moises, okay? Moses was Mexican, okay? It wasn't the Nile River, or it wasn't the Jordan River that they went across when they came to Israel. It wasn't the Jordan River, okay? That was the Rio Grande. It was the Rio Grande. That's right. Jesus was a carpenter. He was doing all the work. That's right. He was Mexican. Everyone knows this. Ted is black. I think I got some black blood in me. I'm not entirely sure. I know I'm part of the Semitic race, though, but I'm also mixed with some European because my grandmother is white. My grandmother actually comes. I've never really talked about this seriously on a video, but my grandmother is white. I'm kind of like Obama. I got my white grandmother. Semitic master race. But my grandmother is white, and she is of Scottish, Welsh, and Scandinavian origin. Her grandfather on her mother's side was an immigrant from Sweden who immigrated to California, and her grandmother on her mother's side was an immigrant from Wales. My grandmother's father, my great grandfather, Frederick Georgeson Sr., his father was an immigrant from the Shetland Islands. I know there's a lot of jokes that you guys can say about the Shetland Islands. Let's hear it. Shetland Islands? You mean? Just say we all know what you're going to say, okay? Pull up the Trump word. It's a little tiny island. Well, it's a group of islands, literally almost near the North Dam Pole. So that's probably where Santa Claus lives when he's off season and he's not delivering presents. But he came in from the Shetland Islands and he moved to California. And yeah, that's how it began. His wife was actually a member of Christian Science. And my great grandfather, Frederick Georgeson Jr., he was a member of the Masonic Lodge. You know, it's funny. We talk about the old days and we say, oh, back in the day, everybody was Christian and they went to church. Well, your great grandparents probably participated in some kind of magic. Like there's a good chance of that. Or maybe they were a part of some kind of secret society because there was a lot of that weird stuff that went on in those days. There was a lot of weird stuff. I would say that the generation of your grandparents is probably a little bit more normal than the generation of your great grandparents. Because like I look at my grandma, and it's like, okay, she went to church and she went to Catholic school, even though she wasn't Catholic, she was Presbyterian. But she went to Catholic school and all that. And then my great grandfather would tell her, when you go to school, whatever you do, don't take the communion bread. And why didn't he want my grandmother to take the communion bread? Because he was a Freemason and he hated the Catholic Church. I still have my great grandfather's little fez Masonic hat. I was wearing it one time. My dad was like, don't wear that. It's part of the occult. America was founded by Protestants, Freemasons, deists, and Satanists. I hate this whole America as a Christian country horse shit. Yeah, I completely agree. It's a complete horse shit. It's a facade. It's a myth. It doesn't really exist. It never has existed. There was a guy, I remember, he was very popular at one point in time. I don't remember his name, but he was kind of like, he was big with Glenn Beck. He was part of that whole like homeschooler revival that happened back in the early 2000s. You guys know what I'm talking about. If you were live in America when Bush was president during his second term, there was like this huge boom in homeschooling. Like everybody wanted to homeschool their kids. And homeschooling, I got my mixed feelings about it. I think the problem with homeschool, like the good thing about homeschooling is that kids will probably absorb more information. The bad thing with homeschooling is that they don't really socialize with other kids. So they're a little too isolated, a little too sheltered. But there was a huge boom in homeschooling, I think, during Bush's second term. And then when Obama became president, it was like everybody was homeschooling their kids. And so there was a guy, I forgot his name, but he wrote a number of books on like why all the founding fathers of America were Christians. I forgot his name. I forgot his name. He was on Beck all the time. It'll drive me crazy if I don't know his name. David Barton, that was his name. Yeah, so David Barton wrote a number of books. He did some documentaries on why or one documentary, I don't really know, on why the founding fathers were Christians. And I actually found a copy of his book over a decade ago at a Costco. And it was talking about why the founding fathers were Christians. And it talked about like how, Thomas Jefferson had Bible studies and he read the Bible. But then you find out that I think it was Jefferson or Franklin had his own Bible and it had his own New Testament. And it took out all the miracles and he made Jesus into this sort of rational religious figure, basically an Enlightenment Jesus, or a Masonic Jesus, I should say. But then you find out that like Franklin was a part of some orgy club and George Washington was a Freemason. Madison was a Unitarian. A lot of these guys were no good. They were part of some weird heretical sects. They were part of the Masonic Lodge. And you find out all that Christian stuff is just nonsense. It's a fantasy that American evangelicals have. Well, our country was founded on Christianity. Well, Christianity had a huge influence on American society. It still does have a huge influence on American society. But they weren't really Christians, and nor they weren't exactly Christians. There was one founding father who was Catholic, though. And nor did the founding fathers want a Christian country in the political sense of the word. George Washington himself said, people who come to America, I don't care if they're Christians. I don't care if they're Jews. I don't care if they're Muslims. As long as they're good people, that's all that matters to me. And that's not really a bad thing to say. I think it would be a terrible thing if people start getting into this way of thinking that says that because you're a Muslim or because you're a Jew, you're automatically evil. Like, I think that's destructive because you can have a Muslim person who was born Muslim, and he's Muslim because he was born Muslim and his parents taught him Islam, but he's really a good, decent person and he'll give his life for another human being. And what do you want to do? You want to berate that guy? Well, if you berate people like that, then what do they think? They think, well, this is how Christians are. And guess what? He's going to latch on stronger to his Muslim faith. When my father was a Muslim, he met all these crazy Christians. I remember one time my father had a job in, I want to say in Wendy's or Jack in the Box or something. And he was Muslim. And there was this black lady who was working in the restaurant. And my dad's job was to, help clean up the restaurant during closing hours. So my dad had to clean the deep fryers and dump all the old oil out. It was a lot of work. So my dad's out there working and this black woman is like, I speak in tongues. My dad's like, what do you mean speak in tongues? I speak in the language of angels. My dad's like, okay, show it. And she's like, should have bought a Honda, should have bought a Honda, should have bought a Honda, should have bought a Toyota. And my dad, after he was done working, my dad got on his bicycle and started biking back home. And he's like, man, I'll never become a Christian. So there's a lot of weird things that Christians, quote unquote, Christians do optics wise is horrible. So I don't think we should become these people who are like, well, if you're a Muslim, you're automatically a terrorist, or like, oh, if you're a Jew, you're automatically like a scam artist or something. It's not a very good thing to do. It's just not really good. I mean, as humans, it's not good. I don't think we should be that way. We should have some kind of peaceful relation with people, even if they don't have our same religious faith. But of course, the idea of having a church state is not a bad idea if enough people are in harmony in regards to the religion. So in Russia, the official religion is the Orthodox Church. The official religion is Eastern Orthodoxy. And I'm completely fine with that. Why? Because the Russian people have agreed to it. For the most part, Russians identify with the Orthodox Church. Okay. If you can pull it off, then God bless you. But if you have a million different people who each have their own Bibles, and they look at the Bible differently, and they're arguing like, well, this verse says this, well, the Greek says that, and no, well, no, immersion. You got to baptize with immersion. No, it's sprinkling. The Greek says sprinkling. Well, if enough of that going on, it's like you're never going to have harmony. So the point of making a church, a state church, is pointless, really. Thanks to you, now I can speak in tongues. Yes, I have taught you the language of the angels. It is should have bought a Honda, because you should have bought that Honda, and it should have bought a Toyota. Right? Makes sense. Homeschooling groups that allow kids to socialize, it's those who isolate their kids entirely. Yeah, I think if you're homeschooling, but if you have like some outlet by which your kids can socialize with people, I think that's fine. But I think the danger lies where kids are just isolated, that it's like they're not, But the thing about it is that even in the homeschooling context where the kids are socializing with other kids, they're going to be socializing with other homeschool kids. And again, it's not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, you'll probably get married a lot faster if you're doing that, because you're going to meet other homeschooling kids and then they grow up together and then they get married. Okay, fine. But I think an issue that I have with that is you're not really meeting people who are atheists. You're not meeting kids who are, who are going to be against your beliefs. It's not preparing you for American society. Now, if we're all Christians and the schools are all Christian, then yeah, we're fine. But if you're living in America where half the population hates God, more than half the population hates God, you're going to have to learn how to deal with that as a Christian. So I think public education really helps prepare you for that. The problem is that a lot of American parents think that it's the school's job to rear their kids, when the reality is, and I'm shocked that so many people don't really understand this, but the reality is that parents need to rear their kids. My parents reared me, they taught me, and I went to public education and I was fine. Never became an atheist, never became a pagan, never became suicidal, none of that stuff. I just went to public education and I dealt with it. I mixed on homeschooling too for those same reasons. The thing is, here in Illinois, they now require kids to learn things like LGBT history. Listen, they could be teaching kids Satanism. If those kids have good parenting and are taught by good parents in good ways, they're going to be fine. They're going to combat that. If your kid becomes a Satanist because a teacher tells them to become a Satanist, then you have failed as a parent. That's my position on that. She bought a Honda. She bought a Toyota. Yep, pretty much. But anyway, yeah. Those are my thoughts for that. I've been here for how long? Like an hour already? If you guys have any questions, just, feel free. Shoot me a question. One Flux 2. You're the guy from Norway. How you doing, my friend? If you ever want to give me a call, feel free to. I know you wanted to talk last week, but man, I was pickling stuff. I was pickling beets, and I had a huge beet harvest this year, much larger than last year's harvest, and so we had to do lots of fermentation and pickling, and that's not an easy task. You think it's like, oh, you just put the beet, you chop the beet up, you put it in a jar, and you put the brine. Like, no, you got to make the brine, you got to chop the beet, you got to clean the beets, you got to harvest the beets, you got to shave the beets. Well, you don't have to shave them. You got to make sure they're clean, then you got to chop them up, you got to make the brine, you got to get the jars prepared. It's like it's exhausting process, but I do this every year. So when will be streamed with Senior Shoebot on Sunday? Do you ever have to fight off aphids or other bad bugs in your garden? Yes. Aphids will usually attack brassicas. They'll usually attack like leafy green vegetables, but they'll attack the leaves, but they like to attack the florets, the flowers of the brassica, the leafy green vegetables. And what I find works with aphids is to hit them with a hose. But here's the thing. After a few years of dealing with aphids, I've had huge ladybug populations in my backyard, and the ladybugs do most of the work for me. So the ladybugs really balance things out. I think the best way to deal with aphids is to allow ladybugs to do most of your work, and then check out your vegetables. If you see any sort of concentration of aphids on one plant, and there aren't any ladybugs dealing with it, then take your hose and blast it. But if you see a plant and it's covered in ladybugs, just let the ladybugs do their work. Don't kill any aphids. Allow the ladybugs to enjoy their feast. I also, when it comes to bugs, I've also dealt with squash borers. It's the reason why I don't grow squash or zucchini. I don't grow any sort of squash. I used to. I just stopped because every time I try growing them, I get the squash borers and they will kill my squash. And I tried using diatomaceous earth. I've tried using like organic sprays and things like that, and it just doesn't work. So I don't grow squash. I rarely ever eat the stuff anyway. It's not my favorite vegetable to eat. Thoughts on Italy's and Spain's future? Will they become great powers after American domination fades, or something more tragic? Oh man, that's a hard question. I read your comment before, and I was thinking how to answer that. Italy and Spain are both strong naval powers, so it's possible that they could become superpowers again. The problem with Spain and Italy is that they are slaves to the Germans because of their debt. So there's several different possibilities that could take place. They could be controlled by the Germans. They could end up being like conquered by the Germans. They could end up revolting. I have read that, and I read this somewhere. I think this was on Stratfor. So you have the southern Mediterranean or the southern European countries like France, Spain, Greece, Italy, Portugal. These countries could one day actually unite, and they could form like a southern European confederacy against the northerners. And if that were to ever happen, it's likely that France would be the country leading that, because France would be the most powerful country. It's possible that Italy will fall into fascism again. There's different possibilities. I have to look more into it. Couldn't children just socialize in the neighborhood? I do, however, agree that formation is the parents' responsibility. Yeah, you could meet kids in the neighborhood, but you have to be careful even with that, But kids don't really socialize anymore. Like, I remember back in the day, people were way more social. You had friends in the neighborhood and things like that. That doesn't really happen anymore because we're so isolated. Everyone's horrified of their kid being molested, which I understand because that does happen a lot with the horrific influx of pedophilia in the United States. I understand a lot of parents are worried about their kids socializing with others in the neighborhood. So yeah, that's I think one of the reasons why it doesn't happen as much. Heather Green, is that church located in Albany? I don't know. You guys are having your own conversation here. Sorry for asking twice. It's just that I don't hear too much about them. I can't really tell the future on that one. But I know that those two countries are basically slaves to the Germans. So they could eventually revolt against the Germans, or they could ally with them. Italians in general have always been regionalist. Yeah, that's why Northern Italians and Southern Italians hate each other. Shoot some videos of the canning process. When I was living in Norway, that's what I used to do to my roses. Shoot them with the water hose. Yep, absolutely. You can grow squash later in the season after the main wave of borers. Yeah, I've heard that before, but where I live, it's so warm and it's so hot, it's like they never really leave. How's the leg, Theo? It's a lot better. I can walk pretty much normally now. I've never been attacked by a rooster like that. I mean, really, I've been like hit by the rooster and things like that. But man, when he hit me, it was like a special kind of hit. He was trying to bludgeon me. And for days, I was just in excruciating pain. It's painful, painful, painful experience. What am I gonna do with the rooster if he doesn't behave? I guess I'll just give him the boot. I don't know. I don't really want to kill the rooster because the hens love him and they're so used to him. So yeah. Turks finding out They're crypto-Armenian due to genocides. Yeah, I'm sure there's definitely Turks who have Armenian blood. They just don't know it. They've been Turkified and Islamized. What's your favorite historical period? If I had to go back to an historical period, it would probably be the 17th century. I just find that whole time so fascinating. Maybe this the 18th century as well. I would love to see like Baroque music in action, like just to go to a Vivaldi concert or a Corelli concert, just to see like the beautiful architecture of the Baroque era would be awesome. And also to talk to people who knew at the time what was happening with the Enlightenment and to get their perspective directly. That would be fascinating. I think what fascinates me so much about the 18th century is that you had this immense struggle between the Christians and the pagans, the occultists, and it was just a real war. You know, it was just an all out war. I've actually heard this before. This is going to sound kind of weird, but don't take this the wrong way. There was a neo-Nazi terrorist. Some of you guys know who I'm talking about. He was from Norway. He lives in France now. His name is Varg Vikernes, and he is a neo-Nazi terrorist. He burned down a bunch of churches back in the 1990s, I believe, in Norway, and he ended up murdering a colleague of his. And he served a number of decades in prison in Norway. He lives in France now, but he used to do a lot of YouTube videos on neo-paganism and Nazism and all that. And I used to watch his stuff, not because I agreed with him, but because, or supported him, but because I monitor the whole neo-Nazi nationalist phenomena. So I remember he did a video in which he said that Europe never fully became Christian. And there were always struggles between those who wanted to go back to paganism and those who wanted to remain in Christianity. And when you first hear it, you think that it's like, oh, that's just him being anti-Christian. And he is anti-Christian. But at the same time, there's actually truth to those words. Why is there truth? Because if you read about like the Middle Ages, you read about the Renaissance, you read about 17th century, 18th century Europe, you will find out that there was always this huge struggle between people who hated Christianity and those who loved Christianity, and it went on and on and on and on. So, for example, in the Middle Ages, you had the Albigensian Revolt. Albigensians were pagans. I mean, these were people who said, well, there actually were two gods, and they had their own mythology, and they had some weird occultism that went on. They had assisted suicide, not assistant, but it was like basically self-human sacrifice. They were people who were in Europe who were involved in child sacrifice. They were people who were involved in very deep and ancient forms of witchcraft in the Middle Ages. And so they wanted to revolt against the authority of the church. And then you also had the Ghibelline political faction who wanted to end the church's political authority. And that was in the Middle Ages. In the Renaissance period, you had a strong movement towards occultism. This would go on all the way into the Elizabethan era. And then, of course, you have the Enlightenment. You had occultic popularity towards occultism. And that went on for centuries. So there was this constant struggle between, Christendom and Europa. Mark Greengrass wrote an excellent book. It was called Christendom. I think it was called Christendom is Dying, or the Death of Christendom, or something like that. But Mark Greengrass, in the introduction of that book, he talks about this struggle, this continual struggle between Christendom and Europa. And when you take away the church, what you have left is Europa. You have Europe. So that's what we have now. Christendom is gone. What we have is Europa. And with Europa, you have Nazism. With Europa, you have very weird forms of pan-European ideologies, pan-Germanic or pan-Italian, pan-Latin ideologies. And so the French Revolution, to me, was really that culmination. It was that explosion of centuries and centuries of that struggle culminating. Even Augustine Bardwell, he talks about how, for a very long time, the occultists in Europe were conspiring against the church, and eventually that conspiracy manifested itself in the French Revolution. And here's the thing is, we've never really cured the disease of Nazism. We have come up with ways to try to prevent it, but it's kind of like the doctor giving you some pills for malaria, and it never cures the malaria. It just kind of temporarily subsides it, but it never really cures the disease itself. We never really cured the disease that leads to things like fascism or Nazism. And I'll read to you guys a quote from Christopher Dawson. He talks about a little bit about this in the end of the book, in the last chapter. Try to find it here. So he says here, they are Christians and rationalists, liberals and conservatives, socialists and individualists, nationalists and internationalists. This ideological division and conflict is a source of weakness insofar as it provides a series of opportunities for the totalitarian powers to apply their techniques of disintegration, just as they do in the case of the conflicts of political interest between the different Western states. So we still have these divisions in the Western world. We still have the division between the nationalists and the internationalists, the socialists and the capitalists. And as long as we have these divisions, you have a prospect for revolutions, you have a prospect for civil wars, and you have a prospect for fascism and communism. And as long as that prospect exists, then the potential towards something like a revival of National Socialism or a revival in communism is entirely possible. We never got rid of the disease. We have only temporarily subsided it, but we never got rid of it. Never. And so that's why I say that Nazism, or that pan-Germanic ideology, could very well come back again. I've been saying this for many years now. It could very well come back again. Just like the disease of pan-Ottomanism never went away. It got kind of buried under the ground, upon the end of World War I, but it never went away. Because as long as you have Turkish nationalism, as long as you have people denying the Armenian genocide and never coming to terms with the reality of the Armenian genocide, you are always going to have the prospect for these sorts of insidious forces coming back again. As long as people in Japan still want to revive emperor worship, as long as they still want to revive Japanese militarism, as long as they deny what happened in Nanking or the reality of comfort women, the potential of these forces bringing back the old demons is very real. Let's see. Do you think France's anti-religious ideology had anything to do with the anti-Muslim policies they implemented while colonizing Algeria? Probably, yeah. I would say so. I mean, look at what the French are doing now with talking about how religious people need to, they need to show their loyalty to the to the Republican ideas of France and all that. A lot of American conservatives, they kind of, were praising the French. They were saying, "Oh, look at the French. They're banning the hijab. Look how amazing they are." Well, this is the country that murdered people for being Catholic. So I don't really think you could put much praise on that without having some sort of suspicion. It wasn't really an attack on Islam itself, as it was more so an attack on religion in general, because once you start attacking one religion, the prospect for attacking other religions becomes very real, unless, of course, you have a national religion or a state religion, and you're simply protecting that state religion. Obviously, you're not going to attack the state religion itself, but you are going to attack other religions. Now, France does have a religion. It's the religion of the Enlightenment, the religion of republicanism. Well, therefore, I should say, not but, therefore, it's not going to attack republicanism, not necessarily, but it will attack things that it considers a threat to republicanism, and that main threat is religion. And French republicanism could be whatever they want it to be. You know, if they want to be pro LGBT, then that's part of their Republican values. That doesn't necessarily mean that people in the Enlightenment would support the LGBT, although I'm sure many of them would. Like, for example, Diderot, he wrote a book about a lesbian nun, and that was in the 18th century, the good old days. So they start attacking Islam because, well, Islam is a threat to their Republican values. But what if the Catholics in France begin to attack the LGBT with much enthusiasm and much intensity? Would then Catholic priests be considered enemies of the state? We have to keep these things in mind before we have this sort of knee-jerk reaction to praise these sorts of policies just because they appeal to our own political narrative. Let's see here. Hey, Theodora, what's your thought on the Italian mafia practicing Catholicism despite being organized crime? What is their mindset or viewpoint on religion? So what I would say to that, it's kind of like with the Mexican population. A lot of Mexican gangsters will have the Guadalupe symbol, or they'll have, you know, the Virgin Mary, or they'll have a cross. And I think a lot of this is just it really showcases the problem with making religion a part of your national identity. Religion needs to be a spiritual outlet for your soul. Once it becomes a national identity, then it will metastasize itself, or it will reform itself to fit that national identity, regardless of how corrupt it may be. So, for example, the Cholo, he will kill people, rob people, sell drugs to children, whatever. But because he has this strong identity of being Hispanic or Mexican, then those Catholic images or that Catholic imagery would be a part of that identity. The problem with that lies in the reality that it's not so much Catholicism that's influencing him, obviously not, but it is more so that particular person trying to force Catholicism to conform to his identity. So the problem is that people are not conforming themselves to Catholicism or to Christianity. Rather, they are trying to take the religion of the national identity. They're trying to get that religion they're trying to force that religion to conform itself to the national identity. And that's where the danger lies. These people aren't really going to church. If they are, it's for baptisms or marriages or funerals or whatever. But these people aren't Catholic. You can't be a Catholic and be a gangster. I think that's quite obvious. How's your penitential season going? Any suggestions besides the church's pre-Vatican II formula? I feel like I get used to eating once a day after a while. I don't know. I mean, I would say try to go vegan for a day. I find that to be very helpful when it comes to fasting. Is you only eat vegan meals, vegetables, grain, fruit. Stay away from anything that's hearty. Stay away from things that are fatty. Stay away from things that are deep fried. I don't really understand how Catholics will say, well, I'm fasting, but they're eating like fish and chips. It's like, it's not really fasting. You're enjoying yourself is what you're doing. You got to try to beat your body down. Your opinion on married women working outside the home. The image of the fifth. Oh, come on. You're trying to bait me with this feminist stuff. The image of the 50s TV shows weren't completely accurate, as even in agrarian societies, women worked outside the home. I don't think it's necessarily bad that women work outside the home. I would say though, it depends on the work. Like if the woman is a nurse, I mean, I think nursing is a job that women are really good at doing, generally speaking. I think if the woman is like a school teacher and she's teaching kids, like that's understandable. But if it's like your wife is the CEO of some major corporation, I'm like, I don't know. I'm not sure if I'm okay with that. That's just because the problem is that the woman makes more money than the dude, and then she starts like trying to overpower him because like, well, I make all the money, so you got to do what I say, and that's the problem. It's like I hate to speak of humans as if they're animals, but sometimes that's the impression that I get. It's like humans act like animals. So because like one person's making more money than the other, like they dominate that person. So if a woman is making more money than the guy, then in a way she can use that as leverage against him. I hate to say this kind of stuff, but man, like marriage, like I'm gonna be real with you guys. I'm gonna be real with you guys. I ain't married, but marriage is scary. I'm not joking. Marriage, that shit is horrifying. Like when we think of marriage, we think of like the wedding and throwing rice in the air and doves flying and but meeting people and knowing people who are married, that shit is scary. Ain't no joke about that. Because when you get married to somebody, you're not just marrying that one person. You're marrying their whole family. And that whole family's got opinions. That whole family has contradictions. They got contrarianism. They start judging you. Oh, you're my daughter. What's going on with my daughter? And they can't say the word daughter like in a normal way. They have to say it in this condescending tone. My daughter. I'm a concerned parent. What are you doing with my daughter? My daughter. And before you know it, you're in the Jerry Springer show. And then not only that, but like you have kids with this person. God knows what's gonna happen. You got to create, the wife's got a crazy brother. He has an influence on it's just, I don't know. That shit is scary. Like marriage is scary. Like if you're going to get like my philosophy is if you're going to get married, you got to be like 100% confident that it's the right person. If you're not 100% confident, just end it because you're going down a river of complete misery. Do you feel like there is a place for the discipline in modernity, self-flagellation? That is, no, I don't believe in self-flagellation. That's bullshit. I don't believe in it. I just don't. I think that's just self-mutilation. That's not what Christianity wants. I don't think most people realize the real Satanism requires human sacrifice. Is heretical religion necessarily racist? What is the root of heresy? Can you please also comment on sola scriptura? Okay. I'll try to answer this as quickly as I can. Is heretical religion necessarily racist? No. Are there heretical sects that are racist? Yes. What is the root of heresy? Rebellion and pride. The word heresy actually comes from it comes from a Greek word that means to choose. So when a person begins to choose what he wants to believe in and what he doesn't want to believe in, that's heresy. And what makes a person have a compunction or is that even a word? A compunction. Is that a word? I don't know. I'll look that up real quick. But what makes a person become heretical? It is a word, but I just misapplied it. What makes a person want to become heretical is their pride. Oh, I don't believe in praying to no saints. That sounds like a bunch of rubbish. Oh, the Virgin Mary? Oh, she wasn't a virgin. I can't believe that a woman could ever stay a perpetual virgin because I was a whore and everyone else must be a whore. So people put their pride into the religion and they try to impose their pride on the religion itself. And then that's when they get into heresy. Can you please also comment on Sola Scriptura? Yeah, Sola Scriptura is bullshit because people will always ask me, where is that in the Bible? Well, where in the Bible does it say that everything has to be in the Bible? You can't find it. Oh, because Sola Scriptura is an illusion. What book did you read about war between Christians and pagans and occultists in the 17th and 18th century? I would recommend reading Augustine Bottiwell's book on Jacobinism. There's some other interesting books that you can read. I don't remember all their names, but Augustine Bottiwell has a great study on the occult influence on the French Revolution. What instigated the Reformation? Oh my God! I mean, you're asking for a whole history lesson. It's going to take like 5 hours. Is it what? Okay, was it mere power? Yes, it was definitely a power grab. I would say that the Reformation. I have an unusual theory about this, but I think that the Reformation had a lot to do with several things. One, the church was like becoming very, very corrupt. A lot of people began to look at the church's wars as not their wars, and they didn't like how the Catholic institution was trying to pull people in Germany to fight wars for the Catholic Church. And a lot of people got sick of that. And the other thing also is the fact that a lot of the German people in ancient times were actually forced into Christianity. So maybe there was a long history of antagonism toward the Catholic Church, but it was like underlying and it wasn't very blatant. And maybe it just exploded in the Reformation. I thought about that myself. Also, the fact that for millennia there has been tensions between the Germans and Rome. I mean, the Germans have conquered Rome more than any other people. So the idea of Germans being subservient or having religious submission towards an institution in Rome bothered a lot of people. Like, there's a whole bunch of factors that go into that. If you haven't watched the Godfather series, you should. It examines the theme of Catholicism. Yeah, I've watched the Godfather. You know what, man? I'm going to get into this a little bit. I don't like mafia movies. I don't. I've watched a number of them. The only mafia movie that I kind of liked was I think it was called like Goodfellas or something, but it had Sean Connery in it, and they were actually fighting the mob in the movie. But for the most part, I don't like mafia movies. I think they're so freaking boring. I don't give a damn about criminals. I don't care about organized crime and organized criminals. I don't give a damn about how smart they were, how tough they were, how articulate they were, how loyal they were to each other, the family and all that. I don't give a shit about any of that stuff. I find it to be boring. I find it to be mundane. I'm so tired of people like worshiping mobsters as some kind of geniuses. Like, it just doesn't interest me at all. Like, as soon if I look at a movie and as soon as I see that the movie is about mafia, I'm like, all right, I'm not watching this, because I find those movies to be so boring. Like, we all know it, okay? Robert De Niro in a suit with a baseball bat in his hand, and he's like, we got to be like a team, and he bashes somebody's brains out. Oh man, he's so tough. Look at that. I love this scene when like Dino Spumoni shoots Montello because Montello like double crossed him in a card game or something. Like, I don't want to hear about that. It's so like low class. I don't give a shit about any of that stuff. It's like, why is it that we glorify white organized criminals, but like I don't see a lot of these people glorifying black organized crime or Mexican organized crime? Like, there's not a whole lot of that goes on. Why? Because they're like white and they're organized or something. Oh yeah, we got Scarface. That's another annoying movie. I don't know what was so special about that film. It's about a bunch of thugs. Like, I don't care about thugs. I don't care about thugs. It doesn't seem that the clergy and theologians oppose the false enlightenment ideas much. There were people in the clergy who did support the Enlightenment. There were people in the clergy who were against it. The Reformation was both the princes of Germany and monarchy of England, robbed Catholics literally of land and gold in the name of religion. Yes. Yes, absolutely. Again, different factors. The average poor European who became Protestant wasn't getting any gold. But like the powerful families that supported the Reformation, they were getting the money. Yes, absolutely. There was, for example, the Archbishop of Canterbury. I think his last name was Kramer or something. He became very wealthy because he took all the money from the monasteries. His family became very wealthy. Yeah, absolutely. People in the British elites, English elites, they were taking money from their monasteries because the monasteries were evil and corrupt. So take all their money. Yeah, absolutely. I hope you find someone special one day. I hope so too, man. You live in France, so I mean, are you like? How are the women over there in France? Keep in mind, the mafia originally began as vigilante group to counter and defend the native peoples against the Muslim Moors. Okay, so they had some noble history in the past. Like what? One mafia was defeating another mafia, so now that obligates us to revere that one mafia. It's like one mobster defeats another mobster. He doesn't give a shit about helping the average person. He just cares about his own power. So it's like, again, I don't see the point in like revering these people much. I think it's just it's a very annoying idea. I think the microphone is probably better like this. I would say just do this, make it vertical. Marriage isn't always the family either, but also submission. I have a friend who's completely whipped by his wife. He has no balls anymore. Poor guy. What's your favorite topic to discuss right now? I like talking about revolution, the Enlightenment. I after finishing this book, I have decided to take on something that I didn't really want to do, but lately I'm like, man, I really want to read on this subject. I have decided to read all of Josephus's Jewish Wars. I really want to learn about the destruction of the temple. I really want to learn about that conflict because I've heard so many. I think I'm going to come up with a new term. I think I'm going to come up with a term. Let's call it cringe history. Okay. There's a lot of weird. Hold on. Let me adjust this mic. Good grief. Do you guys know how old this mic is? It's a decade old. Over a decade. I got this mic back in 2009, my friends. Let's make it a little bit louder. There we go. Much better. So I got this mic back in 2009. It's an old ass mic. I'm like, you know what? Why don't I just get that mic and use it? Put it to some good use. I had dreams of becoming a radio host over a decade ago, and I never really did it. So this mic just collected dust. I'm like, I should use this mic, put it to some use. Anyway, I've heard all this cringe ass history, like, well, you know, the Jews were just fighting for their freedom, and everything also is, oh, the destruction of the temple happened in this, 70 something AD. So that was this, and that means that Rome is the Antichrist or something. It's like, I want to learn the nitty gritty details. People talk about like the Battle of Manzikert. The Seljuks defeated the Byzantines in the year, I think it was like 1037 or something, 1038. And yeah, that's what happened. And I'm like, no, I think we should read some more into it. And eventually I read a book by John Skylitzis, and it was a book on that era. And there was a whole section in this book about the Battle of Manzikert. John Skylitzis actually was close to the emperor at the time. And so his book is a firsthand source, really. And I think he was with the emperor during that battle, around the time that battle was taking place. And John Skylitzis gives us the nitty gritty details. He even talks about what verses were read during the reading during the mass, and that the soldiers were participating in during the Battle of Manzikert. Like, he gives us all these very, very vivid details. And I think that when you read, if you want to learn about an historical era, you should really get a book that gives you the nitty gritty. That was my only problem with this book, is that, again, I understand he never finished the book, but nonetheless, you don't really get like a tremendous amount of detail. You get, don't get me wrong, you will learn a lot reading Christopher Dawson's book on the French Revolution, but he leaves a lot for you to research on your own. And he kind of acts like, he kind of writes in a way that he is assuming the reader knows what he's talking about. Like, he'll just throw. This is one thing I not too crazy about, and I guess that's how they wrote in those days. But like, he'll start throwing like a dozen French last names. It was because of Matalon that the king did this. Like, who's Matalon? Doesn't really explain anything. So he assumes that the reader knows all this stuff. So he leaves you to Google all these names to learn about it. But I think it's always good to find a book that's really going to give you the nitty gritty details. That way, when you're talking about the subject, you can have a more round knowledge base on whatever the subject may be. Let's see here. Hold on. I personally can't stand. Hold on a second. Mafia movies bore me too. Wow, that Italian killed his cousin for a bitch. So interesting. Okay. I personally can't stand most or just the soccer mom ones, women, so I've always preferred guys' company. Platonic. Less Henning. Need more male nurses to counter such drama in healthcare. Scarface with Al Pacino was actually a remake of a movie from back in the 40s. Oh, I didn't know that. For Protestants, those who gain monetarily are the ones blessed by God. Ah, yeah, that's true. A lot of Calvinists had this idea that if you were wealthy, that meant that God blessed you. Yep, absolutely. It's all about materialism. In that sense, I think Protestantism is almost like a mafia unto itself. It's all about money, all about getting that money, and that's why you hear all these till this day. You hear this, you know. God, you have to give God the timing. You have to give him the patience. That's how he's going to help you with your finances and your marriage. Like, it's all about materialism. It's not about spirituality. That's why I think a lot of people are going to Catholicism or going to Protestantism or Eastern Orthodoxy. Kovric Theodore, you said hot, and I'm guessing you're talking about the women of France. Yeah, well, we get that. They're good looking, but like, are they wife material? Are they like, you know what I mean? Like, give me some information on that. If you want to know something about Romanians, it's that we are 90% Italian. Well, that's why you guys are called Romanians, right? Romans, yeah. Romania was conquered by, I think you guys originally were called Dacians, and then the Dacians were invaded by the Romans, and then you guys got Romanized. It's part of a commentary against foreign and okay. John Samnight, Romanian is the language closest to Latin. That's what I've heard. In fact, I have heard that if you can speak Romanian, you can learn Spanish and Italian and Portuguese overnight because they're so similar. In agrarian cultures, women work in the field near the home and near their children, so it doesn't separate the mother. Yes, I would agree with that. Even in the Bible, it talks about women who go to the market in the morning to sell eggs. And yeah, again, it depends on the work, you know. Working in a farm, working in a nursing home, dealing with children, and you're working near home. Yeah, I don't really have a problem with that. But it's like, you know, if the woman is a CEO of a company and she has to make business trips to New York or she's in the military and she has to go to some army base in Maryland somewhere every month, like, I mean, to hell with that. That's bullshit. I'm not interested in that. Would love to go to Romania. Check the Discord. The Orthodox Christian Discord has an open forum right now with top-level clergy, philosophers, and apologists. Join if you have any questions. Okay, I'll keep that in mind. Thank you very much, Pano. Here at the Trad Catholic Church I go to, the women are pretty good for wife material, just saying. Are you married, Kovrig? Have you married one of these French women? Or are you in the process of marrying one? The original Scarface was from 1932. You wish you were married. Why aren't you married yet? I mean, that's the question I have. Because I hear all these trad Catholic guys are like, well, the women in my church are amazing. Are you married yet? Nope. Then what the hell is going on? Why can't you get one? Why can't you snatch one? Are they all taken, maybe? I don't know. Yeah, marriage is hella scary. Because you're married with someone, it's like, you got kids with that person, oh, now you're really stuck with them. And if they're bad, you're in a whole line of misery, my friend. Anyway, if you guys want to talk on Discord, I'm open to it. If not, I put the link in the description. You guys can chat with me on Discord if you guys want. Oh, you're a NEET. Hold up. You're Romanian and you're a NEET? For those of you who don't know, a NEET is someone who just stays in their room on the computer eating fried chicken all day, and that's it. Wait, hold on. You're Romanian and you're a NEET? You don't feel ready to get married. Okay. That's your prerogative. How old are you, by the way? Are you like what, 23 or something? Are you in college? Like what's stop like why don't you feel that you're ready to get married? Where did the rest of you here in YouTube chat go? Just completely died. If you want to live in Germany, here's an advice. Stick to your family. Otherwise, society will tear you apart. Oh, you're 21. You're still very young. Yeah, I could see why. Robbie, are you German? Do you live in Germany? I'd be interested to know. And I'd be interested to get more detail as to what do you mean by society will tear you apart? Like, how does that look like? What does that look like, you know? Oh, by the way, somebody said that I should get a voice filter. I actually just bought one. It's coming in the mail and it's going to be like right here. So supposedly it's going to make my voice sound crisper. So maybe I'll sound like a legitimate streamer soon. But anyway, I think I'm done for today. I've been here for what? Almost 2 hours. I would say 2 hours. If you guys have any questions or whatever, just let me know. One Flex 2, I know you wanted to talk. If you want to talk, let me know. Or maybe you want to talk after the chat. I don't know. But yeah, you guys have been very fun today. I think we've had a lot of fun. I think this was a good stream. This was a pretty good stream, I would say. I've had a lot of fun with you guys. So I think I'm done for today. Been here for about 2 hours. I think I'm good. All right, guys. I'll see you guys next week. I'm going to be continuing to do videos, try to do a video every day. So we'll be good. General thoughts on Vatican II and the new Mass. My thoughts on Vatican II. Not a fan. Just put it that way. I'm not a fan of any of that. I am not a fan. I am not a fan of any of that stuff. Why? Hold on. I just said goodbye, but somebody asked me a question and they got me started. So I'm not going to be going just yet. Hold on. I am not a fan of Vatican II or the modern day Mass. I'm not a fan of Pope Francis, and I am tired of people pretending that there isn't a problem. I'm tired of people pretending that there isn't a problem. People will be like, well, Pope Francis is actually abiding by the teachings of the church by saying that gay people are great. It's actually, in accordance to the teachings of love comes from Jesus himself. Like, oh my God, Catholics are basically like Pharisees. They will take the scripture, they will twist things around, and they will make it seem that it's orthodox when it's just obviously not. It's obviously satanic. Like, for example, Pope Francis says, who am I to judge about this homosexual person? That was the beginning. That's how it started. And people could twist it and say, well, he was talking about people who are trying to leave the homosexual lives. Okay, fine. Okay. And then it was like all these bishops in the Vatican, they tried to get this idea pushed that, well, our LGBTQ brethren can contribute many fruits to the life of the church. And that was scratched out thanks to the African bishops, thanks to our brothers in Africa. If it wasn't for the brothers in Africa, we'd all be Sodom. Like the Catholic Church would be officially Sodom. And then we have the recent drama of Pope Francis saying, well, I'm completely in favor for gay civil unions. Hold up, mic drop. Well, not mic drop, but like, hey, stop. What the hell did this dude just say? He literally just said gay marriage is good. That's what he said. The Pope supports gay marriage. Like, how can you not write that off? You can't just write that off. You can't just explain that away. You can't reinterpret it into meaning something that it doesn't mean. The Pope supports gay marriage. So now every gay Catholic is like, well, the Pope supports it. The Holy Father says it's okay. He supports gay marriage. And then you have these idiots who are like, well, actually, Theodore, he supports civil unions. Civil unions are marriage. I don't care what anyone tells me. Civil unions are marriage. when a man and a woman go to the government to get married, they're married. They're husband and wife. Bottom line, they're married. So if two men get married by the state, that's gay marriage. The church, the Pope just said gay marriage is good. I don't see how anyone can support the Pope. I can't support this guy. I just can't. I can't do it. So you can't explain this stuff away, you know? It reminds me of these priests in the Old Testament that you read about who supported paganism and sodomy and child sacrifice. And that's what this is. That's what this is. Pretty soon, abortion is okay. I'm telling you, that's what's coming. It's been fun and it passed by so quickly. Well, I'm still here. I haven't gone yet. But good night. Cardinal Robert Serra resigned. I'm sad. He's the real deal. I would say Serra he seemed okay, but man, he was getting way too close to the nationalist stuff. Sorry for keeping you. Thank you for answering. God love you. Well, listen, I have no problem with answering people's questions. I do have a question for you. I've meant to ask for a while now. All the times you expose Milo Yiannopoulos, did you ever get any response from him? I know Milo tweeted one of my remarks about him, and that was pretty much it. So yeah, didn't go beyond that. Have you read about Jean Meslier, the French Jesuit who was an atheist? People didn't know that he was an atheist until after he died. That name sounds very familiar. I probably have read about him. I read a book years ago. It was by Archbishop Lefebvre it was called Religious Liberty Questioned. And I'm pretty sure he mentioned this Meslier guy. So I think I have read about him. What's up real quick? Jean Meslier. Huh. I don't think I have heard about this guy. He was an atheist. Man, this guy was alive in the 17th century. It's old. He wrote a book promoting atheism and materialism. That is amazing. I'm definitely going to read more into this. That is fascinating. Thank you for telling me about that, Anthony. Heather, the problem that I had with Serra was that he said some crazy nationalistic stuff. For example, that God created certain people to live in certain parts of the world, which is crazy. To answer your question from before, I'm not German. I live in Germany for 6 years, originally from Oh, you're from Macedonia. Yes, you called up before. Yes, I remember. There was a Polish Catholic priest who was executed by atheism as well. A lot of priests were murdered by the atheists. Orthodox and Catholic, which really, it leads to the whole nonsense of the atheist delusion. People talk about the God delusion. Remember, there was like an era in the early 2000s, like 2006, 2007, in which everyone was just going crazy about atheism, like atheist. I'm an atheist, and there was the atheist challenge, and there were all these like debates between like Kirk Cameron, and this atheist, and there was John Lennox and Dawkins and hello Joshua, Sam Harris, and there was Daniel Bennett and Hitchens, and all these guys were like famous overnight. And everybody was like, "Oh yes, atheism is great. Atheism is awesome." And there was that book, The God Delusion. Well, how come no one talks about the atheist delusion? I want to talk about the atheist delusion. The atheist delusion it consists of several things. One is this idea that atheism is going to take over the world and atheism is unstoppable. That's a little bullshit because it completely rejects the reality of human nature, which is that human beings will tend, eventually after living so many years in debauchery or in degeneracy, human beings will tend to seek for things outside of themselves. That's why a lot of people get into spirituality. They want to seek things outside of themselves because they realize that, well, life is very, very short, and it can't all just be about me. It can't all just be about this physical world. There must be something out there. So people will begin to pursue spirituality and mysticism because they want to go beyond themselves and they want to surpass and transcend the material world. This is the beautiful thing about being human. So there's that, and then there is this atheist delusion that atheism is not a religion, or that that atheists are not religious people, and this is completely counteracted by the fact that whenever atheists take full power and you have like a weird atheist utopia, for some reason a bunch of people die by the millions, and they start to kill Catholics, they start to kill Christians, they start to kill Muslims, they start to kill Buddhists, they start to kill people who aren't atheist. And it's like, well, atheism is so amazing. I'm drinking boiled water and burning my insides because the communist Chinese soldiers told me to. And you wonder why so many people hate communism. Khmer Rouge butchered millions of people. So that's the delusion. Atheists are so delusional they can't see the danger in their own ideology. That's to me is the big delusion of atheism. That's the atheist delusion. I really need to download these live streams and like break them apart into separate videos, because for some reason, like when I'm just doing this flow of consciousness, I just have way better ideas. Atheism is a psyop. If you could prove that to me, I would love to hear it, because I find that super fascinating. Polish priest from 17th century who was executed for exposing atheism, espousing oh, okay, yeah. Okay, I see what you're saying. Gotcha. Atheism is depressing as hell. Absolutely agreed. Who wants to believe that you came from a monkey? I mean, that's bullshit. Sarah referred to the importance of the health of the nation state, and not simply just take in people who've culturally not on this, who are culturally not on the same page. Okay, so Native Americans were living in North America for thousands of years. Apparently, according to Sarah, God created them for North America, and then the white man was made for Europe, but a bunch of white people came to America, and we're fine. So I don't really see how his philosophy makes any sense. I just don't. Africa was made for the Africans, but we got a bunch of African people living in North America. We got a bunch of Africans living in Europe. We got a bunch of Africans living in other parts of the world, and they're fine. Okay, I just don't really see why I should accept that. Yeah, the Jews were living in Egypt for hundreds of years, and then they moved to Canaan and they killed the Canaanites. Well, I guess the Canaanites they lost the plot. This whole idea about connecting land and people, that's some blood and soil bullshit that I'm not willing to accept. It's the nuance to what he said. Oh my God, the nuance. Well, if you could just explain to me the nuance and how it's applied to reality, I'd love to hear it. Heather, if you want to give me a call and we can discuss this, I would be glad to do it. The entire American Atheist Organization, nothing but a complete group of lunatics. Their former president, David Silverman, tried to get a woman high and Sodom. Yeah, I know. I read about that. It was just creepy, crazy stuff. That stuff is maniacal nonsense. Atheism is just a huge delusional cult. Don't understand why Sunnis cry that Wahhabis ruined Islam, as if they weren't a bunch of shitholes before the Saudi dynasty. Okay. The fool has said in his heart, there is no God. Yep. And he is evil in all of his ways. I learned the hard way about that. I was working with a Mexican atheist for not a long time, but for about a year or so. And yeah, he was no good. Okay, fine. If your Orthodox friend wants to talk to me, I'm glad to talk to him. Anyway, I think I'm done. I've been here for over 2 hours, close to 2 hours and 20 minutes. I'm leaving. I'll see you all later. Have a good weekend. God bless.